What if a single crack in a silent bell could echo louder than the roar of an empire? In the heart of Philadelphia, long before the United States became a global power, there stood a bell, large, imperfect, and destined for immortality. Today, the world knows it as the Liberty Bell, but in its earliest days, it was simply a tool, cast in metal, meant to call lawmakers to order, to signal time, to mark ordinary moments in a growing colony. But history had other plans. The story begins in 1751, when the Pennsylvania Assembly ordered a bell from London. It was meant to hang in the tower of what we now call Independence Hall. Inscribed on its surface were words from the Bible: "Proclaim liberty throughout the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." At the time, those words were not yet revolutionary. They were hopeful, perhaps even symbolic, but not yet realized. When the bell arrived in Philadelphia, something unexpected happened. It cracked. Before it had even fulfilled its purpose, before it had rung across the streets of the city, the bell broke during its very first test. For many, this would have been the end of its story, a flawed object returned or discarded. But the people of Philadelphia were not so quick to give up. Two local craftsmen, John Pass and John Stowe, melted it down and recast it, not once but twice, until it produced a sound that was acceptable, though never perfect. And so, a flawed bell began its life. For years, it rang out across Philadelphia. It called citizens to meetings, marked important announcements, and echoed through a city that was slowly becoming the center of something extraordinary. By the 1770s, tensions between the American colonies and Great Britain were rising. Taxes, control, and authority were no longer distant concerns. They were daily frustrations. The air was thick with uncertainty, and whispers of independence grew louder with each passing day. Inside Independence Hall, debates raged. Men like Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin gathered to discuss a dangerous idea: breaking away from the most powerful empire in the world. It wasn't just rebellion, it was treason. If they failed, they would be executed. If they succeeded, they would create a nation unlike any before. Outside, the people waited, and somewhere above them, in the tower, hung the bell. On July 8, 1776, just days after the adoption of the Declaration of Independence, the bell is believed to have rung out across Philadelphia, calling citizens to hear the first public reading of the document. Though historians debate the exact details, the symbolism remains powerful. A bell, once cracked and imperfect, now calling a people to freedom. The sound it made that day may not have been flawless, but it didn't need to be, because what it represented was far greater than perfection. As the years passed, the bell continued to serve its purpose, but its identity began to change. It was no longer just a tool of governance. It became a symbol, a reminder of courage, defiance, and the birth of a nation built on ideals that were still being defined. But the bell's story was not without silence. At some point in the early 19th century, the bell developed its most famous crack, the one we see today. The exact moment remains uncertain. Some believe it happened during a funeral tolling for Chief Justice John Marshall in 1835. Others suggest it occurred earlier. Regardless of when it happened, the crack rendered the bell unusable. It would never ring again. And yet, its silence only made it louder. By the mid-1800s, the Liberty Bell became a powerful symbol for the abolitionist movement. Those fighting to end slavery saw in its inscription a promise unfulfilled: proclaim liberty throughout the land, not just for some, but for all. They adopted the bell as a representation of their cause, giving it the name we know today, the Liberty Bell. It was no longer just about independence from Britain. It was about justice, equality, and the ongoing struggle to live up to the nation's founding ideals.
During the Civil War, as the United States was torn apart from within, the bell stood as a quiet witness to the conflict. It did not ring, but its message remained. After the war, as the country sought to heal, the bell was taken on tours across the nation. Millions of Americans saw it with their own eyes, touching the metal, staring at the crack, and reflecting on what it meant. It was imperfect, just like the nation itself. In the 20th century, the Liberty Bell continued to inspire. It became a symbol during both world wars, representing freedom in the face of tyranny. Civil rights leaders invoked its message as they fought for equality. Even today, it stands as one of the most recognized icons of the United States. But perhaps what makes the Liberty Bell so powerful is not its history alone, it's its imperfection. It was flawed from the beginning. It cracked before it could serve its purpose. It was remade, reshaped, and still never perfect. And yet, it became one of the most enduring symbols of freedom in human history. Because freedom itself is not perfect. It is fragile, it is tested, it is challenged. And like the Liberty Bell, it can crack under pressure, but it can also endure, inspire, and remind people of what is worth fighting for. Today, the bell rests in Philadelphia, visited by millions each year. It does not ring, it does not move, but it speaks, through its history, through its symbolism, and through the ideals it represents. And that crack? It's not a flaw to hide. It's the very thing that made the world listen.